I started the recording.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Chris and Nanette, Monique, Kelly, Marcia, Frank, Einer. My name's Angeluna for today. And we are gathering here for Conscious Community, a way of helping people get more aware of community issues and how no matter which community you're coming from, you can grow together and work together on many different kinds of interesting things that inspire you from the heart. And so we're having a conversation today that is being led by Monique Mares from the Public Food Project, a beautiful, kind, loving human that I got to meet this year who I really feel wants to feed the whole world right out of her own kitchen if she could. It's so beautiful. And Frank Cordova, another amazing, loving human who knows that the way we do things on earth can be done from a place of love and cooperation, and seems to use so much of his vital life force energy educating people on that. And so it's a privilege to be with you all because I've met you all this year or before, and just seeing how we're all aligning from that space. And if you're hearing this and hearing us for the first time about conscious community, I invite you to feel into your heart and trust that maybe you're aligning with us and this information for a special reason. And so just feeling how as we connect in our heart, we are in the right place at the right time with the right people, and what can we create from that place. And with all that said, I just wanted to sing a tiny little piece, offer a gift of song from my heart to show you the invitation of connecting from that heart space. It comes from a song by Lila June, a great teacher that I've been following out of New Mexico from the Janae people. It's called Time Traveler. And the chorus goes, we are here to give all our love to the ones unborn. We are here to give all our love to the ones unborn. So, as we arrive into our hearts, feeling who came before us, giving all their love that we could be here now together, and what we can create, knowing that they were trying to help us have a foundation, healthy soil to grow, and what can we leave for the future. And with that, I turn it over to the lovely, amazing Monique Mares to educate us on the local movement here in Pueblo.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here. And I kind of did this probably a little more formal than I needed to, but I wasn't really sure what the group was going to be like. So forgive me if it feels a little stuffy, but I doubt that it will once we dig in. It just looks formal. Yeah, I put some slides together just to kind of guide us in conversation around what is, well, who am I, you know, and why would you want to spend any time listening to what I have to say on this topic, and where we're at kind of from my perspective as a community, things that we've done so far that we can evolve, and kind of like that big vision, where do we want to go and how are we going to get there. So we'll spend 35, 40 minutes on this topic, kind of taking pauses for discussion. It feels like a small enough group that we could stay in one place, but I also think there's value in breaking up into smaller units as well. So we'll see what feels right when we get there. One opportunity will be coming up here pretty soon, but that's kind of the idea of how we're going to spend some time together. So the question at hand is, you know, are we doing it right? Right? Compared to other communities of this size, what's missing? What can we be doing differently? What is the status of people's connection to the food system here in Pueblo? And I think we're moving in the right direction, probably just like your movement here with the conscious community. You've seen a spark and some energy come in, but my big question is, for the food system especially, are we moving fast enough? Are we moving in the best direction for Pueblo? And how do we know that we're hearing what everyone wants and taking that into consideration? Those are kind of the big things that are always in the back of my mind. I have some hashtags here. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. So that's little Monique. Many, many moons ago, I was raised here in Pueblo, Colorado. I'm adopted. I have a little brother who's also adopted. So we were a family of 2 with my parents, who are still together after many, many moons. My mom's lived in 81004 her entire life. I think that's pretty unique. But yeah, when I turned 18, I bounced. I had to get out of here. Had my first job very early on, was always kind of working for money. Got my first official paycheck from Pizza Hut at the age of 15. And to be quite frank, had it really rough. And just decided that I needed to, you know, spread my wings. And so I applied to Yale University. I was the first person in my family to ever go to college. Yale University was the only school that I applied to. I did everything they tell you you're not supposed to do. I put all of my eggs in that one basket because it just felt in my heart that, you know, I needed to set my sights high and not give up. So that's what I did. And I ended up at Yale, and to tell you the truth, it was a really, really challenging experience. I'd been a straight A student the entire time I was here in Pueblo, Colorado. I was valedictorian of my graduating class, president of every club, and I thought that I was really prepared for this, and I wasn't. You know, food, I'd say, is my number one passion and area that I want to focus on here in Pueblo. My second is opportunities for our young people, because everyone told me my whole life that I had it. I was going to move in the right direction. Everything you needed to live the life that you want to live, make the dream come true. And pardon my French, but I got my ass handed to me when I got out into the real world. To follow along with Pueblo over the years, and to see now that our school children, you know, even before the pandemic, were only being offered 4 days of education, to me is, I don't have the right words. It really makes me feel terrible for our future. So I know we're here to talk about food, but put that in a parking lot. I had one of the rudest awakenings of my life when I stepped foot on that campus. After that, you know, made my way through. I worked 40 hours a week while I was at Yale, and because I had to pay my own way there. Obviously got some scholarships, but as we all know, private tuition is super expensive. My mom wanted me to be a nun. Yeah, that didn't quite work. I looked at Pueblo, 81004 her whole life. Very devout Catholic. I love her a lot, but yeah, there really wasn't a lot of support for me to pursue education. So busted my ass and got my first job at Google, actually. Moved to San Francisco, had a great time at the Googleplex, got a deep foundation for tech and the tech industry early on, felt really grateful for that. Moved back to Colorado to support the Campaign for Change in 2008. And very shortly after the Barack Obama campaign, I started working at this company called VMware, which is virtualization software. Basically, it's like a hologram of a physical computer so that people can do more computing with less physical infrastructure. So definitely stayed in this tech space and was doing really, really well there. But, you know, there come these times in your life where your heart screams louder than your head, and it's like, hey, this isn't going to cut it. So I decided that I would return to my education and decided to get a master's at a very unique program at the time. It was only one of 3 in the country, specifically on food systems. So I went to NYU and got a master's degree in food. The department is Nutrition, Public Health, and Food Studies with a focus on food systems. Stayed in New York for 3.5 years, had a really unique experience there, worked at the James Beard Foundation. If you're at all a foodie, that name should ring a bell to you. Worked at the largest catering company in New York and also managed the country's largest workplace CSA at the time. So really started to connect with local food movement in those years. Before I'd been a member of CSAs, and I always grew up with a garden, and my family does a lot of food preservation. That jar in the center of my circle there is a recipe that's been in my family for countless generations. Way back when my grandmother and her mother's mother were kind of doing their thing in Lagos Morenos, Jalisco. And I now am the keeper of this edible tradition. So all of the arms of my family tree kind of come to me once a year, and we do this together. And this taste memory is very profound for us because it connects us so far back and my intention so far forward. But during that time, that was kind of it. Food was private. It was something that me and my family did, or it was my job at Pizza Hut, or it was serving tables to make it happen. But I never really felt like I was in the loop, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I left New York City and I went to Washington, D.C., where I worked for the Organic Trade Association and the U.S. Department of Agriculture, really promoting organic ag as a viable way to feed the world. Obviously, lots of controversy there, lots of times where I was the only woman in the room, lots of times where I was the youngest woman in the room, lots of times where people, looked at me like I was crazy. And at the end of the day, ended up being very successful in that role, basically opening people's eyes to organic agriculture as a viable commercial practice, not just for the backyard gardener. And had the privilege to do work in 37 countries around our world in that 4-year period. I said to myself when I graduated from NYU, what do I really want? I wrote this list of like my dream job. And at the very top of my list was international travel, someone else to pay that bill. And, focus will get you there. So that's what happened. And then things got a little shaky. There was an administration change, and representing the United States on an international scale became really challenging. I'd show up in places like South Korea and Japan and Holland and Mexico, and I'd be the token American in the room, and they'd look at me and say, well, what the hell's going on? How can we trust you? You just pulled out of the climate accord. What's really, and I kind of recognized, this is getting tricky. And, there's one part of this puzzle that I haven't quite fitted for myself. And that was to actually be a farmer. At that stage in the game, I'd done it all, literally. From driving the truck to washing the dishes to making the food. I've experienced so many layers of the food system, from tiny all the way to that global scale where I was actually writing international trade policy for the United States government. So I said to myself, hey, I'm writing all this policy and I've never actually had my hands dirty, and how do I know if I'm doing the best for these farmers if I've never walked in their shoes? And so I quit my job and received a fellowship to go to a place called the Farm School, which is a beautiful nonprofit in Athol, Massachusetts. And they focus on child education, child farm experiences on the farm. So kids go there, they have a bunkhouse, they do a 3-day on-farm experience, and then they have an adult learn to farm program where basically you walk in knowing nothing, classic city slicker. I was. You walk in knowing very little, and by the time you leave, you're running a 400-acre organic farm with pickings, picking pigs and chickens and beef and goats for dairy and goats for meat and cows for dairy and cows for beef and, you know, a 300 family CSA and orchards and vineyards and our own trees. You know, we created our own heat, so how to knock down a tree and really kind of manage a forest. And then I realized, whew, you know, there's so much more to this. And then my spirituality began to change at that time as well, because I actually got to like hear what the plants were telling me through this experience, not just kind of observe them as separate, but become part of the system. And as luck would have it, you know, I have a little brother that I mentioned. He's losing a battle with addiction. In August 2019, he had to undergo open heart surgery for the 3rd time, as well as have a double amputation of both of his legs as a result of his addiction. And obviously something like that is life-changing. And so I had to come back home and kind of support my family. Before that, you know, this is kind of the vibe that I was used to. This is a shot of Tokyo. I love Japan, and I think there's so many lessons that we can learn from the way that they value and respect food. There's 2 phrases that are used when you're eating in Japan. And the first is itadakimasu. So it's like their grace or their blessing before the food, itadakimasu. It means like, may this food in its purest form bless me and my body, so that I can go out and support others. It's a very beautiful kind of gathering of intention. And the second is montai nai, and that means we do not waste. So that whole tip to tail, use every last piece of the product, is really at the core of Japanese food culture. There's this famous story of a young chef who was training with Nobu, who is, you know, a preeminent sushi artist and has restaurants all over the world, and, you know, is considered one of the most renowned teachers of this art. And this young chef was, you know, trying to keep his station very clean and threw away some potato peels. And Nobu comes over to his station and basically reads him the rights. And the young student is so confused. This is garbage. There's nothing to it. You know what? It's just a potato peel. Look at how beautiful I've prepped these. You know, I'm sure they were the tiniest diced potato you've ever seen in your life. And he brings him over to the trash, takes the peels out of the trash, washes them, and turns them into a snack for the crew to teach him that lesson, like, no, nothing in this kitchen goes to waste. So that has a big influence on the reverence that I think is due to the food system. And this is just a picture of the farm that I was at in Massachusetts, and how, like I said, for probably the first time in my life, I actually felt like I was part of Mother Nature. Like I was not acting on her, but I was a part of the system, and really caring for these animals and rearing them, and all of that vibe changed, you know, it changed everything for me. It just so happened that my brother got sick, and the Pueblo Food Project, which we'll talk a little bit about in a minute, needed someone like me. So before we jump in, and Angelina, you decide if you want people to go off in pairs or if you want everyone to stay in the main room, but I would just love to hear some thoughts and get your juices flowing on these 3 questions. So what is a food system? What does that phrase mean to you? What are the parts of a food system? And what is your role as an individual in the food system? And like I said, Angelina, you decide how you want us to be, if you want us to break out or stay in the main room. And we'll just give this, you know, a 5-minute pause.
Okay. Yeah, I think staying in the main room, since we're so small right now, if anybody wants to just unmute themselves or raise their hand, either way, and we can, so you're invited to share into that question and response, and then we can learn from each other.
Yeah, so I'll throw those questions in the chat, but they are, what is the food system, or what is a food system? What are the parts, and what is your role? Don't be shy. There are no wrong answers at this stage in the game. And there are many people on this call that I don't know, so I might just call on a name that I don't recognize. Let's see, I see Nanette has a hand up. I'm not sure if that's for this or something else, but Nanette?
Okay, well, first of all, I'm just amazed at your background, and you're such a gift for us to have in the community, so thank you. Did you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
All right. Well, we have a food system now, and it's quite corporate. And most of the mainstream food system is not based on local communities. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So just to keep it succinct, I would like our food system to become smaller and based in local communities, using what you said about integrating ourselves as consumers as part of the system of growth, and that I want to see more permaculture practices integrated into that, because right now we don't really have an agricultural system. And as you probably know, agriculture means field. We have an agribusiness food system, which means that the profit motive is more important than feeding people for health. And so basically I could talk for a long time, but I'm just going to keep it at that. We don't have a local food system that's very strong. We have an agricultural or agribusiness system that's based on monoculture, and we don't keep the environment in mind in our current food system. And I'm really concerned that that really that's the problem. Money is the motivator and not the environment, and not, it's not earth, people care, earth care, and share the surplus as in permaculture. So basically, our food system was not created by us. It was created by the forces of that really don't have the people in mind, or even the environment, however they pretend to be. Okay, so I don't know if that speaks to you or not, but it's what we have, and I don't consent to it anymore. That's how I feel.
All right, yeah, thank you for those observations and those sentiments. Certainly we can all think of plenty of examples to add color to every single thing that you're saying. I would agree with you. Dog Henry? I'm not sure. You're on mute there.
Hi, my name is Jenny. Dog Henry was my dog who passed away, so that's just a screen name, sorry. Anyway, my thoughts about being in the food system is that as a consumer, I have a huge power. I know that I'm only one person, but I can affect a lot of other people if I, maybe I go shopping with some friends and we go support the farmers up on the mesa who are doing organic farming. And I mean, follow the money, all that stuff. If we use our money to show the producers, we only buy organic, we only buy non-GMO, we only buy responsibly raised plants and animals, we will have more power. But again, we have to help it to spread. So I have to tell my friends and how important it is. It's not just a little deal, it's a big deal. Because like you said, the corporations have the power and the resources, the land, the pesticides. And so we have to show our power by spreading the word as much as we can, and being true to ourselves, and only buy what feels absolutely right in our heart and soul. That's all.
Yeah, you bring up a very interesting point, and almost a conundrum when we look at it. There are many ways to farm, right? We know that there are many types of farms and farmers and methods out there. And one of the biggest critiques of the organic movement is that it's a movement of the elite, and that the price premium that is required for organic just isn't feasible for folks who perhaps are on a fixed budget or for the hunger relief system. And we'll talk about this again later, but the Pueblo Food Project is definitely working to kind of create some equality across the types of foods that our community members get to enjoy, whether they're buying it at full price or whether they're getting it from a community pantry. But it's definitely something to keep in mind. The reality that organic really is out of reach for some people is something that we have to work on as well, to kind of make it possible for everyone to feed their families with delicious, nutritious foods they enjoy. But I just say that because sometimes we forget that for some folks, it's just not feasible right now. Okay, how about one more, and then we'll move on.
Hi, I'd like to speak. I'm gonna stay without the video because I feel like I look like a mess. Anyway, but I'm happy to be here, and I'm not in Pueblo, I'm in New Mexico. But I wanted to share a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank you, Monique, for listening to your spirit's voice and returning, and now helping in the area that you are. And I agree with what Jeanette, I think, and Nanette said. I want to put a different perspective on it. I'm a Native American and Mexica mix. And I just want to say about our food systems is that we're so disconnected, not only from the earth, but also what, like you said in Japan with the peelings, what we could actually do. There's old customs that we can implement. I think that, yes, I agree that, that organic food is pricier, but I think that we can learn and teach other people how to use the food that they do have from a nutritious point. And one of the ways that I've learned is if you can't afford organic, then put, which is really inexpensive, is a little bit of baking soda, a couple of tablespoons of baking soda in your water, and wash your vegetables and fruits. And that takes off maybe not 100% of the chemicals, but it does take off a lot. I think also, I don't know what you're going to be talking about, but I lived a number of years in California, and a good friend of mine actually started a program called the Mesa Verde, which means green table. And he actually used it as a nonprofit organization, or it's not a nonprofit organization that continues to exist. And he went to the poorer neighborhoods, and he offered them ways in the compost or compost ways to compost, but also gardens so that they could begin to grow their own foods in their own backyards and become much more sustainable, self-sustainable for their families. So I'm excited to hear about what you have to say, but I want to say, I just want us all to remember that we are not different from the food source. When you said that you actually felt that and heard and sensed and smelled and allowed your spirit to receive the food, I think we have that opportunity every time we put something in our mouths. And so I look forward to that experience with all of you in terms of what I'm going to learn today. And I want to thank you all so much from my heart.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great place for us to continue here. So let me pull this back up. All right. Oops. So I have this web here, and we're not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but sometimes people forget that the food system, as Nanette mentioned, there's lots of parts involved, whether we're talking about the global food system, the national food system, or even a local food system. These are all pieces of the puzzle. You have the growing of the food. You have the processing of raw ingredients into, things that are safe to eat, shelf stable, however you want to look at it. You have distribution, which is such a critical piece that a lot of people don't really have a sense on how massive the distribution scale is. In fact, if you ask me, and many other scholars would agree, 95% of the hunger we experience in a community or at a country level is a distribution issue, not anything else. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then we have the consumers, the eaters. And there are so many places where we're actually eating. It's not just at home. We put a lot of responsibility on the school system to feed our young people. We put a lot of responsibility on the healthcare system to feed those who are hospitalized. Our hunger relief system in Pueblo is so vibrant. So there's lots of places where people get their food. It's not just the store, and it shouldn't be. And then, of course, we have the back end, the waste management and the food rescue, and how we turn those products that we weren't able to consume, or the bounty that we weren't able to eat ourselves, how we give it back to the earth in the form of rich compost. So these are the key areas. We have the growing, processing, distribution. We have the access point. That says retail and market, but actually I prefer the word access. We have the consumption and waste recovery. And I want to point out for folks that this second sentence here, I believe to be absolutely true. Well, we know that the food system is critical infrastructure, especially when we're talking about developing our own local food system. We must require high standards of transparency, accountability, stewardship, and trust. These are foundational if we're going to create a food system that respects Mother Earth, respects the individuals who help make the system function, like farmers and farm workers, and our bodies. So I just put that out there to you. If there's something we can grab onto, I hope we can all agree that those are the basics. So Pueblo Food Project is one of the many food movements that I am involved in, and it's kind of a new thing here in Pueblo. Our logo represents a couple of things. So obviously we have the beautiful river that runs through our city and feeds all of our fields out in the mesa. We have these little spirals because hay is actually one of the largest exports, ag kind of products that we grow here in Pueblo, Colorado. We have the various rows, and you're seeing this sage color come up a lot because it's reminiscent of the indigenous colors and medicines that have been in our communities for generations and generations. And we don't want to forget those roots. Obviously, we have the mountains in the background, the setting sun. Pueblo is really the nexus of sun, soil, and water. You talk to any of the farmers out there, and you have other experts come in from around the country, and they examine our soils. They take a look at our sun exposure. They see that we have this bounty of water. And I know there's lots of conversation around water, but in fact, our farmers are much more taken care of than others in Arizona, California, Washington, and Oregon when it comes to the water situation. So just really being grateful for that. In front, you have the Pueblo chili, which is ubiquitous with Pueblo, but actually the #1 food crop that we grow in Pueblo County is pumpkin. There are about 890 registered farms in Pueblo County. Let's talk a little bit more about the food project and our setup. We have over 100, we're almost at 200 now, coalition members strong, and anyone who eats can be a member of the Pueblo Food Project. So you might know someone who does that. Holler at me, you can join us. We were founded in May 2019 by Senator Bennett and Walter Robb. Essentially, Walter Robb is the former founder and CEO of Whole Foods. They came to Pueblo to visit the farms, and Walter Robb, with his visionary approach, was looking around and was like, Pueblo, what's wrong? You're sitting right on top of your farming community, and I don't see one lick of local food conversation happening at scale. Where are you at, you know? And as it happened, I like to call him our fairy godfather. He sprinkled a little bit of green on top of the initiative and said, here's some cash, go get something started. So that's how things kicked off. An $18,000 donation from a man named Walter Robb and a lot of community interest. And now we sit at 5 working groups, 3 task forces, an advisory council, and a youth council. I'm really excited the work that the youth council is doing. The mayor and County Commissioner Chris Wiseman kind of co-chair the initiative, and the group meets once a month, the end of the month, for updates. That meeting is open to all, so would love, if you're interested, you come and join us. The goals that we developed kind of as a community coalition together. So one of the most exciting features of the Pueblo Food Project is that it's a collaborative process. It's not one voice, it is the community's voice. Everything we do gets vetted by multiple members of the coalition. Every piece of spending that we spend even gets vetted by our coalition. We have a decision-making framework that gives everyone an opportunity to give an opinion on, hey, is this how we should be spending our grant money? We've been very lucky to receive a number of grants. I'll talk about that later, but that $17,000 investment has grown and grown and grown. You know, in the last year, I think the applications that we've written have been awarded, you know, more than $250,000 in 2020. And we're on pace to kind of beat that number already for 2021. So a lot of work is going in here. But the North Star, what we're really aiming for is that we're recognized across the nation as a local food system that creates economic opportunity, represents our diverse culture, and ensures everyone has convenient, affordable access to food that they enjoy, with the goal being to develop a sustainable, vibrant, nutritious, equitable food system that supports everyone here in living a healthy and happy life, because food is at the root of that. You know, it's really critical. You can't have a good day if you're hungry, you know, that's just not going to work. So these are kind of the areas that we're focusing on: healthy food access, creating the local food system, food and farm literacy and ongoing education, engagement for influence, so how we get, you know, folks in positions of power to do what we want, for lack of a better word, and optimizing resources and partnerships. For those who've been in the Pueblo community for a long time, you know, it's not going to come to a surprise to you when I say Pueblo is a competitive community. Pueblo likes to talk smack rather than celebrate each other's success. Pueblo this, Pueblo that, all of these attitude problems that we've known exist for years and years and years. Well, you're not going to hear about it at the Pueblo Food Project. We are doing our best to change that culture, change that mindset. You know, we either start or end our meetings with appreciations. We like to celebrate the success, no matter how big, how small. You know, we want the opportunity to share the positive vibe that we're creating, that others are creating, and we don't ever want to feel like it's an us, them. This is a community movement. So it's something that I'm focusing deeply on, how we kind of shift that culture. Before we get into what we've actually been doing, given kind of the sneak peek, I'd love to hear from the folks on this call. You know, what are some of the ways that you think Pueblo's food system could be improved? And let's get specific about, you know, our community, our area. And what would you focus on if improving the community food system was your responsibility? So there are a number of us on this call who've kind of taken on that personal charge to say, no, we want to make this better. But I invite you to put on your creative cap for a moment and say, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and my job is to fix the food system. What do you think you would focus on? So I'll stop sharing. We'll just leave it 5 minutes of conversation. Go for it, Jenny. You're on mute, sister.
You remembered my name. Thank you. my first thought, and I've been thinking about it during your whole talk is, and I've thought about it for a while, is I think it would be a really good idea if we started some community gardens in Pueblo. We have plenty of open land. The soil would certainly have to be reworked. And, you know, maybe we could get some grant money or some companies to supply the soil. And then volunteers from our community meetings and that could work the land. That's something that I'd be very willing to do. And I think if we had some in, you know, like maybe at least four different areas of the city, and tell people that people in the neighborhood can get a plot and plant things, and maybe they would pay a very small fee. And then they could use that land and grow what they wanted to grow. Or we could have a committee say that, no, this is the committee's property and we're going to plant what we think that this area needs from input from the people who live there. But so it's a community project that we could absolutely get into, I think, with the land available and with Gratishar behind us or in front of us, whichever, saying we'd like to take over that plot of land here in Pueblo. What do we have to do to get it? I'd like to see that come up at the committee meetings, and I need to know, where are those meetings every last Wednesday of the month? That's all.
Yep, I'm happy to give you those details towards the end of our conversation. They'll be in the follow-up notes. Other ideas? Other ideas? Go for it, Chris. You're on mute there. Uh-oh, maybe you can, there you go.
There we go. I had
Yeah.
the idea that what about some kind of incentive to get people started, because you know that initial starting line is difficult to find sometimes. You might have an idea that, hey, I want to start a garden, I want to grow some of my own vegetables, I want to grow some of my own spices. What if there we had kits that we could actually distribute, you know, something simple, but maybe like even an indoor windowsill kit with sage, thyme, a couple of things that somebody might use that helps them get started, maybe drums up an interest in somebody where it might stick, and they might decide to, hey, you know, next year maybe I'll turn some soil, get some tests done. I could set up a little bed in my back and start being self-sustaining. You know, that kind of turning that into a community aspect. If you target certain areas, suddenly you may find that neighbors end up with a surplus, and they have to figure out what to do with their surplus. And that kind of leads people into that localized growing environment.
All right, I see Dina with a hand up. You'll be our last comment, and then we'll move on.
Okay. I was kind of thinking we're a lot of, well, I've worked at restaurants here in Pueblo, and maybe kind of incorporating some of the locally like grown spices and stuff here in Pueblo. I know some of the restaurants do the Pueblo green chili, but I've noticed just even recently with the pandemic and the restaurants closing down, our veggies look horrible. And it's just like, it would be so nice to get everything local where it's fresh and they last a lot longer, especially like spices and sage. And even kind of going off of what Chris was saying too, like even having like those garden systems in our house, or in the house, in the restaurant, I mean, you know, kind of to show people how easy it is. So it might be another way to kind of look at it and get other businesses involved as well.
All right. Well, I am happy to report that the ideas shared are well and alive here in Pueblo, Colorado. The concepts that you've mentioned are definitely being trial and errored, and Frank, who'll be speaking to you a little bit later, has a lot of experience with community gardens. So I'll talk about the Pueblo Food Project perspective. So last year we piloted a program, an edible landscape program, and I went to the city and I said, hey, these are nice spaces. They're usually covered in decorative plants. Can we take them over and cover them in edible plants? And the city said, what? And I said, don't worry, I'll find the people who will be excited to care for the gardens, and we will work out, you know, what we need, and we'll be responsible for the plot. Just give us permission to use the area for edibles. And, you know, as a good advocacy pitch will do, we got to yes. And so we had 3 edible landscapes piloted last year, 1 at Sister Cities, 1 at Central Plaza, and 1 in Mineral Palace Park. We were able to grow edible plants in all of those locations, and to the delight of residents in the neighborhood, as well as much support from our homeless population, they were very successful. So our hope is that we will expand this program for 2021, looking at another community site, potentially in Mitchell Park, and going back to Sister Cities and again, Mineral Palace. Mineral Palace is giving us a spot that's 3 times as large. So that program has worked, and the gardens are open to everyone. There's a little bit of information in there that says this is what is in the garden, come and get it. And everyone was like, oh, you know, it's going to get destroyed and people aren't going to be respectful and things are going to be ripped up, la, 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 la. None of that was true. In fact, it had the opposite effect. We reduced trash. We reduced unsightly objects like needles and liquor bottles in places where folks were traditionally using those areas to get high. And especially the homeless community who kind of sticks around the Central Plaza, Sister Cities area was so grateful that they were able to receive fresh produce, and they really took ownership for the space. I'd be cruising by just to check in on things, and they'd be telling people who are visiting the spot, it's free, you can take that. So really getting involved. So that's a beautiful, amazing thing. Shout out to the master gardeners in the room, Frank, who was a steward of one of those spaces. And the idea continues to grow. There are many community gardens around Pueblo. So it's a matter of getting them all in one place. Another thing that the Pueblo Food Project does, especially in the face of COVID-19, is direct support distributions. So we have been very fortunate enough to receive around $55,000 from the Colorado Blueprint to End Hunger to provide fresh local produce and other items to families in need here in Pueblo during the pandemic. We've done this in a variety of ways with a variety of partners, but the Boys and Girls Club has been a critical partner for us, as well as District 60. With District 60, we were able to move 1,000 bags of food a day. With Boys and Girls Club, we're serving 200 families at a time. Every single one of these bags are filled with Pueblo products, from fresh fruits and vegetables to tortillas to UC cheese to meat. When we're doing a meat offering, it is all local product. So feeling very excited that we're able to support our farmers and support our families in enjoying the best that Pueblo has to offer. We also partnered up with the WIC office. WIC stands for Women, Infants, and Children, to kind of do something different for their clients. As you know, early childhood nutrition is critical. And a lot of times when you have a family to feed and a fixed budget, it can be really challenging to make the choices that you might want to make, but perhaps couldn't. So we purchased we were the largest customer of Pueblo's only organic CSA. And we purchased those shares outright, and we provided them to families participating in the WIC program for an 18-week season. So they started in June, they ended in October, and they got the exact same bounty and organic produce that a full-paying customer would get from the CSA program. Sadly enough, as I mentioned, the Pueblo Food Project was the largest customer. The majority of those organic CSA shares are going to Colorado Springs. We partnered with Jojo Sriracha, who is an amazing gift to the Pueblo community as well, making her hot sauce using all Pueblo products. Came from Brooklyn by way of Denver and is producing out in Avondale. And she did a little cooking demo or a video really introducing her product to the WIC participants who received that in their box 1 week. The Supporting Pueblo website and the Pueblo Food Project have partnered to create a community pantry. This community pantry services hunger relief organizations in Pueblo County. The pantry is stocked with all local products. If it's the only exception is chicken, because we simply do not have anyone producing chicken at the scale that our hunger relief system needs, but it is being sourced through a Pueblo business, Bay's Meat Market. This particular pantry is available to any hunger relief org who's serving a population that has the capacity to kind of prepare food on their own. These are raw products, beef and sausage and chicken and green chili and beans and things of that nature. But every single thing in there besides the chicken is from Pueblo. We were awarded this concept, this idea that we piloted was rewarded by the Colorado State Health Department with a $175,000 check to support this effort through the end of July. I am currently, working now to write an RFP that will go out to all of our farming community to say, let's make it happen. Let's bring fresh produce into the community all season long. So I'm very proud of this particular effort. No such program of its kind had existed prior to the pandemic. Another thing that I'm super excited about is our teacher pantries. We hear that teachers are constantly digging into their own pockets, and unfortunately, that's just not fair. They care so much about their children, and when they see a child go home hungry, they oftentimes do what they can to kind of change that reality. So we've installed 7 teacher pantries, and the pantries allow the teachers to create a meal kit for the students. The kit includes a pound of locally made pasta, a pound of grass-fed local ground beef, and a jar of spaghetti sauce using all Colorado tomatoes. We're also throwing in a couple cans of peaches and some vegetables to round things out. Essentially, the teacher goes to their pantry, puts together the meal kit, sends it home with the student, and they have a delicious meal for their family that night. So another effort that has come about as a result of some of the awards we've received for hunger relief from the pandemic. You're getting a sneak peek here. This is sketches, self-portraits from our youth council members. The youth council members are partnering with a local artist to put a mural on the levee. And the idea that they came up with is to draw themselves as one of their favorite foods and create it in a cityscape of Pueblo. So they have their first meeting, their first collaboration meeting with the artist tomorrow night. We hope that an application is in to the Pueblo Land Conservancy by the end of the month, and that these young people are on the wall come April or May. So cross your fingers there. The Youth Council is also this week a big week for them. They are putting together 500 baskets of fresh fruit for elementary school students in need as a kind of response to the Candy for Valentine's Day tradition. So we're putting together delicious fruit baskets instead. The students themselves kind of identified the schools that really spoke to them as having a young population with a hunger access need. And for some of them, the decision to nominate that school was extremely personal. It got all the way down to I was teased mercilessly at school because I ate free lunch. So these kids are really opening up and recognizing experiences that they've had and ways to improve. And I'm so excited that they get the opportunity to do this. This last shot here is just an abundance of delicious, wonderful, tasty vegetables. Because as I mentioned, we are working towards creating an opportunity to bring a ton of abundance from our farms into the community from April through July with this pantry assistance grant. Right now we're looking for partners, but thinking that summer school feeding sites are going to be a great opportunity to kind of move homegrown product from farms into the hands of families who might not otherwise enjoy it. So just a friendly reminder that it's tasty here. We got it all. We just have to go out and find it. I'll very quickly throw down the more formal aspect of the goals of the food project. I've shared this to kind of line up with our strategic priorities. We're building on partnerships to increase fresh food access. We're taking steps to bring Same Cafe to Pueblo. Same Cafe stands for So All May Eat. It's a pay what you can cafe that does job training for the homeless population. We are working very hard on an advocacy plan to get PEDCO, Pueblo Economic Development Corporation, involved in developing our local food system. They've been somewhat absent, but we're going to give them the benefit of the doubt and hope that they'll join us. We're creating a local food and farm business support program, so really helping entrepreneurs take their business to the next level, helping existing businesses use more Pueblo product, kind of creating that one-stop shop so you can get your questions answered and pursue your food dreams. We have a food and farm literacy education working group that's really driving towards bringing more education to Pueblo's young people. There was an article last week or maybe early this week in the paper around our pilot project at Roncalli. A little bit more about our greenhouse revitalization dream later. And then of course, you know, whether we like it or not, we have to get involved. Community movements that are shared at decision-making at levels of power where they can actually change the way things are done, you know, in city council, at state senate and otherwise are very important. You know, you mentioned finding land. We actually have a policy that allows you to go to city council and say, hey, this land, can I use it for a garden? There's a process for that already in place. Not a lot of people know that. So continuing to keep that conversation open, building those positive relationships and creating the spirit of collaboration across the community, not just in isolated pockets. You can find out more at pueblofoodproject.org. Our handle is at Pueblo Food Project on Insta and on Facebook. And yeah, and now I kind of want to open up to that aspirational conversation to say, if you had a magic wand, what would it look like? What big dream do you have? What would be different and what would stay the same? And I think we have about 5 minutes for this conversation, and then I'm going to hand it over to Frank. Don't be shy. Everyone can dream.
Well, I actually have a whole list in my presentation that kind of addresses these questions. They're kind of big in a way and kind of a short list because I had a much longer list in my draft that I was doing before I created the presentation. But basically it comes down to, for me, the local food system would provide the majority of our food here in Pueblo and the surrounding community. And, you know, we still could source things from around the world. I don't see that going away, and that's something enjoyable. And one of the benefits of, you know, modern technology and communications and transportation, that we can enjoy foods from around the world and learn about cultures from around the world without necessarily having to travel. Although I do appreciate that you, Monique, and others have gotten to do a lot of travel in their lifetimes. I haven't yet, which I'll touch on more, but a lot of people in Pueblo in particular have not had that advantage. Yeah, getting that food to Pueblo from around the world is still important, and not just Pueblo, but I kind of would love to see that everywhere, where most of the food eaten everywhere is produced locally. That doesn't mean that, you know, we can't share Pueblo chili outside of Pueblo. We still definitely want to do that kind of thing and have other communities do the same. But really, I would love to see us be more resilient and having most of our food produced and consumed in Pueblo County.
Right. How about one more big dream or big idea?
I would like to say I want to use my magic wand to empower people in different neighborhoods to work together to build greenhouses that could support their own CSA model that creates a economy of bartering and building on that abundance that nature teaches for us, and that all of us would learn to grow our own food in the next 10 years or sooner, and that there would be tools to make it easier to do that, like a aquaponics tank you could have on your desktop, or something where we're not afraid that we don't have a green thumb, that we can go ahead and start and feel connected to nature even while we are indoors, and that we will have a chance to build up businesses from scratch that can grow their food year round in their supply chain in ways that we couldn't imagine today, but that there could be thousands of new kinds of jobs as technology allows.
All right. I am going to leave you with a couple of my big dreams, and then we'll hand it over and continue our conversation. So Mineral Palace Park has a really deep historical significance for Pueblo and for the West. You know, you may not know this, some of you might, but at one time in the late 1800s, Mineral Palace Park actually had the world's largest collection of precious gems and stones. That's where it kind of got its name, Mineral Palace Park. It was this really beautiful, stunning place, and it got torn down, actually. The palace got torn down during World War II. But anyhow, Mineral Palace Park also has a greenhouse that has been fallow for over a decade now. There was a fire some years ago, and they have one house that's rehabilitable and another half that just needs a complete rehaul. My dream is that Mineral Palace Park is revitalized and turned into a community learning center where students would have fifth-day education programming, and community members of all ages would be able to share what they know about plants and plant-based healing and growing food and all of those things that Chris kind of mentioned. You know, there'd be a resource there, and it just becomes a place of vitality and life. Dr. Kelly and I have partnered on a couple of concepts to not only have it be a community learning center, but also an urban ag innovation center where businesses focusing on things like aquaculture, hydroponics, could be incubated and supported. After that, I would love to see, when I say county market, who knows what I mean? Are there any old school folks in the room who know what county market is? County market is that store across the street on Prairie. It's like across from Kentucky Fried Chicken, across from that Chinese place. And it was an Albertsons for a while, and now there's like an ice machine there that's super popular. It's a huge facility. And if you were little and you went to county market like me, you know that they handed out like these ice cream samples on the cutest, tiniest little ice cream cones. And it was just the delight of the store, but a huge, huge facility. I would love to see county market turned into this incubator kitchen concept and community learning center as well. So people come in, they learn how to cook with food, they have a business they want to start, they, you know, start it there. It's a distribution hub so that farmers can put all of their stuff in one place, and restaurants can go there and say, this is what I want for my week at the restaurant. They don't have to go out to the Mesa, which for some people feels like a lot, even though it's, you know, not that far. So yeah, that we kind of turn that space also into a center of community vitality focused around food. And then finally, I would love if the greenhouse project evolved into a farm apprenticeship program. And I would love for the greenhouse to kind of create the starts that end up in the field, and the fields actually grow food for a true community-supported agriculture program where families who might not be able to participate in a CSA for whatever reason get access to local abundance. Not only would we be growing food for us, by us, but we'd be training young people at the same time, and potentially creating new entrepreneurs while increasing the nutrition profile of the food that's entering our community from that hunger access piece. So those are kind of my 3 hot tickets. If someone gave me a magic wand, that's exactly what I'd do tomorrow. And those are the things that, you know, I'm trying to use my influence and passion for to see happen here in Pueblo. But that's it. That is all I have for you today. And I'm happy to entertain a question or two if there are any. But otherwise, yeah, I think it's time for me to hand it over to Frank. Any questions?
Thank you, Monique. Does
Jenny,
anybody have any
is that
questions? Looks
Go
like
for
Jenny
it,
does.
Jenny. I see your hands up. Yeah.
I have to explain, I was deaf
I went Zoom
clapping,
applause.
clapping for deaf people.
Okay.
Oh, got
Yes,
it. Okay,
very
thank you
good.
for saying that.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Good to know. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. Well, if anything comes up, you know, you'll have my contact info, and there might be some time, that's right, at the end, if you have questions for either Frank or I, but appreciate you taking time to listen, and, you know, feel a lot of gratitude that you're interested in this at all. So appreciate your time.
Thank you, Monique. Yeah, I didn't do a practice run, so I'm going to try and get through my presentation as quickly as possible. But before I get started, I wanted to just say thank you again to Monique so much, and how much I and probably everybody on this call and anybody who might watch this video or hear this audio in the future probably really, if they have a heart, and I think most people do, would feel so appreciative to you for being here now with us back in Pueblo after your life's journey away from Pueblo for a while, learning all the things that you've learned and having all the experiences that you've had. And just, you are a shining example of a very loving and powerful woman, female force in this community, along with some of the other people on this call. Angelina, my partner, Angeluna, AKA Marcia Beachy, the leader of this community, and Dr. Kelly, who is deeply involved in the Pueblo Food Project. All of you, our friend Dina and Nanette, and of course the males too, our friend Chris and Einar. Everybody is part of the community, and I appreciate all of you. So before I actually begin the presentation, I wanted to try and do 2 minutes of a brief introduction of myself, because I didn't include that in my presentation. Does anybody else have anything to say or anything first? I heard something. No? Okay, thank you. My name is Frank Cordova, just to reiterate that, and I grew up in Walsenburg, actually, small town, but we had plenty of family here in Pueblo, and we would come up to get Pueblo chili every year, or not quite every year, but whenever we could. I didn't have an agricultural background, though there was a little bit of gardening in my family. And so as soon as I graduated high school, I went on kind of a standard path. I was salutatorian of my high school, which doesn't say a whole lot in my opinion, because it was a small school. We had a graduating class of 40 or so. And but I ended up going to UNC, University of Northern Colorado in Greeley. And I was fortunate to get a scholarship to cover 3 of my 4 years there. So I went straight through, got my 4-year degree in business administration, oddly enough, because I'm a terrible business person, but with an emphasis in computer information systems. And so for about 10 years after I graduated from college in 2004, I worked in the technology field, which I did not realize actually the extent to which Monique worked into the technology field also. But I don't know what exactly her role was, but I was kind of the guy behind the scenes, you know, that kept the computers running and worked with databases and that kind of a thing. And so operations is what they call it. So I kept things running. And I worked graveyard shift and sometimes long hours, 10 to 12 hours a night, sometimes up to 16 hours a day. And that wore on me. And I got very unhealthy. At my heaviest, I was 220 pounds. And I kind of burned out and decided I couldn't do it anymore. And I'd saved up some money. I didn't buy a house. That's one thing that I didn't follow the classical path that is kind of set out for us in the United States culture and American culture. of, you know, go to college, get a job, get a family, buy a house, all that kind of thing. I only did the get a degree and get a job part. I kind of tapered off there at the end with the get a family and buy a house part. But and so I quit my job. I lived and worked in Cheyenne, Wyoming. Didn't go too far from home, and I never did any traveling internationally like Monique did. But I decided when I quit my job, since I had some savings, that I would come back to Pueblo, not to Walsenburg, because there's not quite as much economic opportunity there, for one thing. And then another thing, my family that I grew up with in Walsenburg had just moved to Pueblo as well in 2013 when I moved back. And so before I moved back, I started taking a look at myself and what I wanted to do with my life and my personal health. And long story short, I lost a lot of weight. And when I got back to Pueblo, I started getting interested in learning about the food system more, and specifically growing my own food. Learned about GMOs and all that kind of stuff. I did the March Against Monsanto thing, tried to lead some marches, but my heart wasn't in that. And so instead, I started learning about gardening and farming. Tried to start a little organization called Local Food Pueblo, which Dr. Kelly was involved in, and Angeluna. And that was a failed attempt at basically what the Pueblo Food Project is doing now. And so it was a good kind of learning experience for a lot of us. And I don't see it as a total failure, because we're coming back around to it now with much better leadership than I was able to provide in that moment. So now that brings us back to the present, and I am now a certified Colorado Master Gardener through the CSU Extension Office, Colorado State University Extension. This is my second year. I'm going into my second year as a certified Colorado Master Gardener. And so as Monique stated, this past year I helped with the Edible Landscapes project. That was the inaugural year for that. And this year we're going to be doing it again, and we're going to grow it. So I'm super excited. So, all right, I'm going to start my presentation here. Let me share my screen. Okay, I think I have the wrong screen sharing. What are all you seeing here?
I'll come back.
All right, let me try that again.
We are Mother Earth is what we saw.
Okay, here we go. I think you're seeing the full We Are Mother Earth presentation. Okay, so just as I had said in my appreciations at the beginning, I really appreciate, and I feel like we all need as a collective to appreciate our mother more. Our Mother Earth, our mother literally, all of our mothers. We are born from Earth, we are born from women, and sorry, I'm kind of tearing up a little bit. I don't think we have enough appreciation for that. So anyway, we are Mother Earth, and as you can see in the eyeball, we have the little Mother Earth, the pale blue dot right in the middle of our eye there. Found that online, thought it was an amazing image. So now I'm starting with this concept again about our mothers, and it's not as common these days for women to breastfeed their babies. And it's unfortunate, because breastfeeding is incredibly beneficial to the children in health, in connection with their mother, and connection with the earth. As it says there at the bottom, breast is best. It's kind of the new motto, I think, that's being taken up to help bring women back to breastfeeding. And because of a stigma and economic challenges, a lot of women going to work, including my own mother, who was a working mother, I was not breastfed. So, but I'm doing okay. Here I am, and I'm learning how to feed my microbiome and learn how to garden and help people learn how to do the same. So again, as a sort of analogy to that, we have our mother nourishes us as a child, potentially as through breastfeeding. Just as an adult or as a child of the earth, we could eat directly from the earth as well. And I have on screen here for those who don't see a salad that I made myself this past summer from ingredients from the garden. I think everything on that screen was from the garden, except for I think the dressing, and I might have had some sunflower seeds or things like that in the salad, and I don't think those were locally sourced. And then on the other side, we have a bagged salad from the grocery store that looks like a couple different kinds of lettuce and some veggies in it. And it's convenient to do, and I eat that kind of salad from time to time myself. But if you had the choice, which would you rather have? I feel like I would rather have direct from the earth, the salad that I grew, in the garden, harvested within 24 hours, direct to plate. It just doesn't compare. I know from firsthand that it doesn't compare, and I wish everybody could have that experience. So I touched a little bit on the economic factor, and Monique touched on that a lot. On screen, I have a picture of Vandana Shiva. She's an environmental activist and food lover from India. And her quote here is, "In nature's economy, the currency is not money, it is life." So that kind of comes to the focus of what I want to talk about is the currency of life. And also the part of sovereignty that we could have as human beings. We've lost a lot of our sovereignty because of, we talked earlier about the food system and how it's global in scale, and so much of our food comes from so far away, and we're not directly involved in it until the point that we eat it. And so this quote from Abraham Lincoln in 1859 is, "The most valuable of arts will be the art of deriving a comfortable subsistence from the smallest area of soil. No community whose every member possesses this art can ever be the victim of oppression." That was in 1859, over 200 years ago, not quite, something like that. My math is terrible at the moment, but a long time ago, he was foreseeing where we are today. So there's a lot of benefits to growing food. You get the freshest, most delicious and nutritious food you can have. That's one of my most favorite things about it. You get a greater variety of food. You get stuff you can't get in the grocery store. Sometimes you could get them at local farmers markets or at CSAs, things that you've never had before. You have greater food sovereignty, like I just mentioned, or freedom. You have greater food security, and that phrase, food security, means that you're not at risk of going hungry. And a vibrant community. When you grow some food, you help to grow and help the health of people and planet. Now, there's other benefits to gardening, whether or not you're growing food, and that includes getting some exercise and some fresh air, especially if you're growing outside. If you're doing a greenhouse, as long as you have some good ventilation, you're getting some fresh air. You learn practical and valuable skills. You get greater human and ecological resilience. So you become a more resilient person, and there's more resilience to the earth and your community. You also get to appreciate the beauty of life and death, because there's plenty of both in the garden. You could grow the plant, and then at the end of the season, if it's an annual plant, it's going to die. And you see plants and animals and insects and all that stuff coming alive, and then it dies at the end of the season. And finally, for me, the greater the gifts, the greater the blessings. So whatever you put into it, you get out in multiples. Now, this is kind of one of my heroes from South Central Los Angeles. Some of you may be familiar with Ron Finley. And he has this famous quote of, "If kids grow kale, kids eat kale." And that is kind of my experience. I mean, I didn't grow kale as a kid, but I've eaten kale as an adult, and I've really come to appreciate it, in part because I grew it myself. So that is part of the answer to the question of why do we grow food? And so, yeah, as a child, we had some wild mint growing in our yard, and ever since I've just loved mint. It's one of my favorite herbs. And I didn't know until I worked on a farm in 2015 that a type of vegetable existed called a lemon cucumber. They're small, round, and yellow, kind of like a lemon, but they're cucumbers, and they're a little sweeter, taste a little different from normal cucumbers, and they're my most favorite kind, and I love to grow them. And then finally, rosemary, the herb. Until this past year when I actually grew rosemary, I didn't really care too much for it as a food. But after growing it, planting it, and caring for it, I have come to really enjoy it. So I think the experience would be the same with children and adults alike. So there's plenty of challenges to growing a garden. I don't want to lie, it's not all hunky-dory. There's a lot of physical labor involved. You need tools, and you need to think about safety of all kinds. You need to give a lot of attention to the soil, the water, the weather. There's plenty of quote unquote weeds and pests. There could be pollution problems in the soil or vandalism. We started some community gardens at schools, and they were victim of vandalism, usually by the kids themselves, actually. Because, you know, they have problems at home and everything, so got to forgive them for that. And space and money to grow. And I grow in community gardens primarily because I don't have a lot of space at home. So I have several slides here on addressing the challenges of growing gardens. There's the old saying, many hands make light work. And on this slide, I have some photos of our friend Dolores' garden over on the west side of Pueblo. Me and our friend Dina, who I think is or was on this call, and Angelina, we helped her garden this past summer at her nice community garden. There's no pictures of the actual garden here, but believe me, it was amazing. And she's done real good for the last couple of years. Some other challenges can be addressed just through patience, grasshopper. Take a deep, slow breaths and ground yourself. That's always a good place to start. Work intentionally and ask for help. You can't do everything yourself. You're not going to know everything. Be patient and ask for help. Observe very carefully, not just with your eyes and your senses, but with your heart, and respond with that open heart. Mistakes happen, and you should learn from them. I've killed plenty of plants, and I'm not too happy about it, but and I've killed them more than once sometimes. So apparently I didn't learn my lesson. I didn't figure out the first time around what happened, and that will happen. But you need to forgive yourself and forgive others that maybe have done some damage to the garden, intentionally or unintentionally, and be grateful for that lesson. This is one of my favorite phrases of all time. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. The soil is so important. There are ways to garden without soil, and Dr. Kelly has worked a lot in that area. But if you're working with the soil, that is key. If you don't have good soil, you're not going to have good results. The water quality as well, whether you're soil or not, that's incredibly important. And the weather, you got to pay attention to the environment. You could learn to make your own compost. Our friend Dolores, that was on one of the previous slides, she makes her own compost, and it is amazing. She takes food scraps from her own kitchen and from the grocery stores and wherever she can get it, and just puts it into a pile and makes amazing compost. You do not need to always till the soil. Please remember that. This is one of my things I always drive home, because there are living things in the soil. Imagine if somebody came to your house and just ransacked it all the time, every season. You'd have a mess on your hands, and it would just make your life even that much more difficult. Or a tornado coming every season and ruining your house. That's what we do when we till up the soil and there's living things in there. So please do not do that if you don't have to. Use organic mulch and cover crops, and avoid toxic chemicals, and encourage participation, not just from other people, but from other organisms. If you have a good garden that's not full of chemicals, critters will get in there and eat your stuff. It happens, and it's okay. Share. This is another quote that I really love. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. So again, this is one of my biggest arguments against GMOs, is we're trying to fix the flower in that case with genetically modified organisms. rather than addressing the environmental conditions in which we cannot grow food very well. And we really need to look at the environmental conditions and the social conditions, make sure that we can grow healthy food for everybody. And the health cascades across the soil, the water, the people, and the planet. So what is a weed? A plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. We have this concept of weeds, and we don't like them, but they serve a purpose that we might not understand or appreciate. And some of those weeds are actually edible. Some of the most common ones, dandelions. Imagine that. Purslane is another one that I really enjoy. It's called verdolagas in Spanish. And lamb's quarters, or wild spinach, also called calites in Spanish. I've eaten all three of these, and I love them. And whenever I can find them in a place that I trust with clean soil, I will harvest some and enjoy some. And you could see a little bee on the dandelion in that picture going around. And so please don't kill the dandelions, especially in the early season, because those are important food for the bees. And some other challenges, well, just start small, grow what you can. If you can't get into a community garden, just grow on your patio or your balcony or your window if you can. Reuse old containers that you have around. Find free compost or make your own. Grow sprouts or microgreens. That's a really easy way to start. Just buy some seeds in a little jar. Put some water in it. There's some instructions usually with kits that you can get. So you can, that's what's in the picture there in the upper right corner is some, looks like radish greens and maybe some wheatgrass or something growing there. And use resources like me, the Colorado Master Gardener. I'm not the one, there's plenty of us here in Pueblo County. We have an All Pueblo Grows seed lending library. This past year, we had to use little free libraries around town and build seed boxes around town since we couldn't have the Rawlings Library open where we normally have the seeds housed. Or just give us a call at the helpline at the Pueblo County Colorado Master Gardener helpline. Phone number is 719-583-6566. And I wanted to reiterate this, the soil is alive. There's much more than worms in the soil. This is taken from our Colorado Master Garden Notes number 212, the living soil. There's approximately in every 1 cup of undisturbed native soil, it could have as many as 200 billion bacteria, 20 million protozoa, 100,000 meters of fungi, nematodes, arthropods, all kinds of life in the soil. And with that life in the soil, there's going to be life in the plant and life in you. Sorry, I'm moving a little quick here because it's already 3 o'clock and we're running a little over. But my vision for the future includes these things. We talked about that earlier. Food and ecosystem health are priorities. As Nanette was saying at the beginning, right now in this global food system, they're not high priorities. Food and ecosystem health are lower on the chain of priorities, and profit is higher. Everybody should have access to healthy food, and most of our food should be produced locally. We should have no food waste and no food packaging waste. We would eliminate the concept of weeds and pests because we would have a balanced ecosystem. We'd have plenty of edible landscapes and agrihoods. Agrihoods is the combination of agriculture and neighborhoods. So we would have just neighborhoods that have edible food all over the place. This is part of my vision and other people's vision for the future in Pueblo and elsewhere. Now, I wanted to touch again on pesticides and fertilizers a little bit because that is a lot of what affects the soil health besides tillage and disturbing the soil. And pesticides are and should be a last resort. This is what they teach us in the Colorado Master Gardener program. There's a concept called Integrated Pest Management, IPM. And that's what they say, you know, you should learn about companion plants and what things grow well together and helps keep pests away and and how you can manage pests without chemicals first off. And then if you have to resort to chemicals, try and look for Organic Materials Review Institute or OMRI certified pesticides and herbicides in the stores. And then as far as any other information you might need on pesticides, you can visit the National Pesticides Information Center, npic.orst.edu. And the OMRI website is just omri.org. My favorite soil amendments that I've got to use are worm castings and algae grow. Algaegrow.com sells algae grow. Our friend up in Denver makes it. And it includes a terrestrial algae, which is another type of organism that is often absent in our soils, as well as some mycorrhizae fungi and all sorts of other things that help to bring back life to the soil. And our friend Nanette and her daughter and our friend Maral, they produce worm castings as well. And we have a little worm bucket at home too. Monique and others talked about food waste earlier. I wanted to touch on that briefly. There are ways to reduce food waste. This is from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. They have a inverted pyramid that you could source your reduction by only sourcing what you will eat or share with others. You could feed hungry people. You could feed it to animals if there's any extra foods. You can eat the ugly foods because there are foods that don't get eaten oftentimes. When you garden, you're probably going to notice you're getting lots of weird shaped stuff. It's still edible, eat it or share it with others. You can make compost, you could use it for industrial purposes. And then finally, last, we want to avoid sending it to a landfill or burning it. So get creative, make a compost pile, get a worm bucket, get some chickens. Monique has chickens at her house. She's legit, she knows, she has hens, so she feeds most of her scraps to the chickens. So biggest point is just do what you can to reduce food waste. It's so important. Finally, we're getting down to it. Calls to action. Reduce your food and water waste and soil erosion. Don't treat the soil like dirt. There's a difference between dirt and soil. Dirt is, you can't really grow much in there. Only certain types of weeds will grow in there. And that's telling you there's something wrong with the soil. There's something out of harmony in that soil when only weeds will grow in there. So do your best to treat the soil as it deserves to be treated. Learn and share food, share seeds, attention, space, knowledge, share love. Unplug from the drama, recharge with the Mama Earth. Angelina found that picture for me and I really liked it, so I put it in there. And finally, just a quick thank you. Again, Frank Cordova is my name. My email and other contact information is up on the screen here. frankc24@gmail.com or luminary@osl8.life. Our website is oscillate.life. Angelina and I are on there. My phone number, and again, the Colorado Master Gardener Helpline, for those who might be listening, is 719-583-6566. So yes, I rushed through that a little bit and didn't go too off the rails. Appreciate everybody listening. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Yes, I think Jenny has her hand raised.
Unmuting. I still wanted to know where you have the last Wednesday of the month meetings. I said someone told me I could get Monique said I could get the information later.
Mm-hmm. You're muted, Monique. Still can't hear you, sorry.
I will put the link in the chat for you right now.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Monique. Thank you, Angelina, for hosting, and for Marcia and Einer and the whole Conscious Community crew. Anybody have any gardening questions specifically? Since I am a Colorado Master Gardener, you have me on the line right now? No? All righty.
Did you
Angelina,
already
wanna?
start seeds for this year, Frank?
Oh no, I haven't.
Okay.
I want to build some cold frames here in the next couple weeks and start some in the cold frames and build some for Pueblo House and one to have here at our house and try that this year, starting some seeds in the cold frames because we don't have a good spot here in our house. So, and or we could maybe borrow Monique's greenhouse if we could help her fix it.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you. You want to close it out for us, Angelina?
All right. Well, clearly we have so much ground to cover. There's so much we can talk about in terms of really getting into the education part of it and what you can learn and how deep it really goes. But the biggest concept I hope you take away today is just that we need each other and we have so much to share with each other and so much to support each other on. And this is an opportunity as a way we can choose to use our precious life force energy instead of being involved in drama or something that feels like it's draining us and we're not feeling the benefits of that energy being used. This is another opportunity, getting connected to your community, learning about the organizations. Please reach out to us because we are looking for people who are looking for us that want to just, in the name of fun, in the name of connection, work together, cooperate, collaborate, and see what we can actually create. We're making our way through this kind of just without really knowing where it's going, but we know in our heart that it's good things are possible. And so just here on the call, and if you're hearing this after this call, just know that we are looking for you. We want to connect. We want to find ways to get past our differences and work through that to see what we can create for the legacy of the future. How do we heal the soil? How do we heal the water and the air? And what legacy are we leaving for our children's 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 children? And that someday they will be thanking us for having this time together and being intentional together with our precious vital energy. And how do we nourish that mentally, physically, emotionally, all of it? So with that, I just want to say I love you all. Thank you for being on the earth at this time together. Thank you for going a little further with this call and giving us your energy and your attention. And please don't let the conversation end here because clearly there was so much we could have gone into further. And so please stay connected. Please reach out. Please don't hesitate to share what you want to share and let us find out how we can help you do that to the next level. So is there any last, oh, also before I forget, next month on March 7th, we are talking about, we're working with Gregory Howell and the Water Tower Place project. He has fabulous tours, online guided tours, amazing speaker and beautiful heart, very profound visionary. No coincidence that we're all lining up and meeting and sharing our ways of connecting our visions. But please join us next month if you can on March 7th. Same time at 1:30, first Sunday of every month, we meet for Conscious Community. We hope that we can someday gather again in person. And Frank?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but you reminded me also, isn't there a food summit event happening? Is it this month or in March? I think it's now in February, right? Did we want to share that information?
February 18th. It'll be basically a kind of an overview of what we talked about here, just a little more depth, and then there will be a community panel on the impact of the Supporting Pueblo website. Yeah, but you can find all of that info on the Pueblo Food Project page. Thanks for bringing that up.
Awesome, thank you.
Whew, all right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Einer and Jenny and Annette, Monique, Chris, Marcia, Kelly, Jeremiah. He's streaming with us, and of course, Frank. everyone who is with us here and also with us as you hear this, please know that your dreams are important and we want to find ways to connect them. So as we close, may we feel that we are helping each other, whether we see it physically or not. We are holding space together to connect our dreams.
Okay,
Thank
we're
you.
getting it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Have a good evening.